Africa is a continent of extraordinary history, filled with leaders who inspired nations and fought for freedom. But alongside the heroes, there have been rulers who governed through fear, intimidation, and brutality. These men built their power not on love or respect, but on terror. Their citizens lived in silence, their enemies disappeared, and their nations were shaped by fear. Today, we count down the top 10 most feared presidents in African history. From ruthless dictators to unpredictable tyrants, these names remain forever linked to suffering and control. Stay with me until the end, because number 1 is a man whose reign of terror shocked the entire world. Number 10, Jean-Bedel Bokassa, Central African Republic. Jean-Bedel Bokassa came to power in 1966 after a military coup. But he wasn't satisfied with being president. In 1977, he declared himself emperor in one of the most bizarre displays of dictatorship in African history. His coronation alone cost nearly $20 million, money his starving nation could not afford. Bokassa was feared for his unpredictability. He beat his ministers with his own hands. He ordered torture and executions without hesitation. Some even accused him of cannibalism. While these claims remain debated, they added to the terrifying image he cultivated. Citizens lived in fear because no one knew who might be next. One day, you could be in his good books, and the next day, you could vanish. His rule ended when the French, his former allies, helped overthrow him in 1979. Yet his legacy remains one of extravagance, cruelty, and fear. Number 9, Siad Barre, Somalia. Siad Barre ruled Somalia from 1969 until 1991. When he first took power, he promised unity through a socialist vision. But in practice, he created a police state where fear controlled the people. Barre's regime relied heavily on secret police who spied on citizens and crushed any form of dissent. He played clans against each other, fueling divisions that left deep wounds in Somali society. Those who opposed him were imprisoned, tortured, or executed. People feared even to speak his name in private. By the time he was ousted in 1991, Somalia was already collapsing. His fall marked the beginning of a brutal civil war that still haunts the nation. For Somalis, Siad Barre remains a reminder of how fear can destroy an entire country. Number 8. Charles Taylor. Liberia. Charles Taylor's rise to power is one of the darkest chapters in West African history. Before becoming Liberia's president in 1997, he was already infamous as a warlord. He led a rebellion that plunged Liberia into civil war, recruiting child soldiers and unleashing unspeakable atrocities. Even as president, Taylor ruled not as a statesman, but as a warlord in a suit. He backed rebel groups in neighboring Sierra Leone, fueling wars marked by mass killings, amputations, and terror campaigns. His militias spread fear across entire regions, forcing families to flee their homes. Citizens lived in terror, knowing Taylor's forces could appear at any moment. His downfall came in 2003, when he was forced into exile and later convicted of war crimes. But during his reign, he was one of the most feared leaders in all of Africa. Number 7. Sani Abacha, Nigeria. Sani Abacha seized power in Nigeria in 1993, and his regime quickly became one of the most repressive in the country's history. He ruled with an iron fist, silencing critics through intimidation, imprisonment, and assassination. One of the most notorious cases was the execution of activist and writer Ken Saro-Wiwa, who spoke out against environmental destruction by oil companies. His death shocked the world, but inside Nigeria, it sent a chilling message: speak out and you will pay the price. Abacha also used fear to maintain complete control over Nigeria's vast resources. He looted billions of dollars while ordinary citizens struggled. His secret police spread terror, and Nigerians learned to watch their words even inside their own homes. Though his rule lasted only 5 years, the shadow of fear he created has never been forgotten. Number 6. Mobutu Sese Seko, Zaire, now Democratic Republic of Congo. Mobutu Sese Seko ruled Zaire for more than 3 decades, from 1965 to 1997. He cultivated a cult of personality, renaming the country, its cities, and even insisting people abandon Western names in favor of African ones. But behind the image of nationalism was a brutal and corrupt dictatorship. Mobutu executed rivals, tortured critics, and silenced the press. His opponents simply disappeared. Citizens lived in poverty, while Mobutu built palaces, wore expensive clothing, and flew his laundry to Europe. He was feared not only for his ruthlessness, but for his unpredictability. No one could challenge him without facing death or exile. His fall in 1997 was celebrated, but the destruction he left behind continues to haunt the Democratic Republic of Congo. Number 5. Omar al-Bashir. Sudan. Omar al-Bashir came to power in 1989 through a coup and remained in power for 3 decades. His rule was marked by oppression, war, and genocide. The Darfur conflict remains the darkest stain on his legacy. Entire villages were burned, families massacred, and millions displaced. Bashir's militias terrorized innocent people, leaving behind a trail of suffering and despair. His government tightly controlled Sudan, silencing opposition and using fear as a weapon. Even after his removal in 2019, he remains wanted by the International Criminal Court for war crimes and crimes against humanity. For millions of Sudanese, the name Bashir still brings painful memories of fear and violence. Number 4. Robert Mugabe, Zimbabwe. Robert Mugabe is a figure remembered with both admiration and fear. When Zimbabwe gained independence in 1980, Mugabe was hailed as a liberation hero. But over time, he became a dictator who held on to power for nearly 40 years. His land reform policies, while presented as justice, turned violent. Farms were seized, the economy collapsed, and those who resisted were crushed. His infamous youth militia, known as the Green Bombers, terrorized the population, beating, torturing, and intimidating opponents. Elections were marred by violence, and many lived in fear of speaking against him. While some outside Zimbabwe praised him for standing against colonial powers, inside the country, his rule was defined by fear and suffering. Number 3. Mengistu Haile Mariam, Ethiopia. Mengistu Haile Mariam's regime in Ethiopia was one of the bloodiest in African history. He ruled under the Derg military junta from 1977 until 1991. Mengistu launched the infamous Red Terror, a campaign against students, intellectuals, and anyone suspected of opposition. Thousands were executed, and their bodies were often left in public to send a clear warning. Families lived in fear of being taken away in the middle of the night. But executions were not his only weapon. Mengistu used famine as a tool of war, blocking aid to regions that opposed him. Millions suffered while he consolidated his grip on power. Even today, Ethiopians remember his name with fear, a symbol of cruelty and oppression. Number 2. Muammar Gaddafi, Libya. Muammar Gaddafi ruled Libya for 42 years, making him one of the longest-serving leaders in Africa. His rule began with revolutionary promises, but evolved into a regime of absolute power and fear. Gaddafi's secret police were everywhere. Libyans knew that a careless word could lead to torture or death. Public executions were used to terrify the population. His opponents were hunted down even abroad, as Gaddafi's reach extended far beyond Libya's borders. He also used fear as a tool of foreign policy, funding armed groups across Africa and even beyond the continent. While some admired his Pan-African vision and defiance against Western powers, inside Libya, his rule was one of oppression, control, and terror. His downfall in 2011 was dramatic, but for decades, he was one of the most feared men on the continent. Number 1. Idi Amin Dada, Uganda. At the very top of this list is Idi Amin Dada, the man history remembers as the Butcher of Uganda. He seized power in 1971 and ruled until 1979, leaving behind one of the bloodiest legacies in Africa. Idi Amin expelled tens of thousands of Asians from Uganda, destroying the economy in the process. But his true reign of terror was felt by ordinary Ugandans. Estimates suggest that over 300,000 people were killed during his time in power. Amin's soldiers committed mass executions, torture, and acts of extreme cruelty. His closest allies never felt safe because Amin was unpredictable. One day, he could laugh and joke. The next day, he could order an execution without reason. Internationally, he became a symbol of dictatorship and fear. Inside Uganda, his name was spoken in whispers. To this day, he remains one of the most infamous dictators, not just in Africa, but in the world. These 10 presidents remind us of the dangers of unchecked power. They ruled through intimidation, silenced their people, and left behind scars that still shape their nations. Some began as heroes, but history remembers them as tyrants. So now I ask you, which of these leaders do you believe was truly the most feared in African history? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into history's most unforgettable leaders.